Okay, good morning, distinguished speakers, panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yuichiro Yoi. I'll be your host for the sessions this morning. Welcome to the three-part ASEAN Power Grid discussion series at the Asian Clean Energy Forum 2026. These sessions are especially timely as we examine opportunities and practical solutions to the challenges faced in moving ASEAN Power Grid projects from ambition to implementation. We invite everyone to join us for all three sessions until 3:30 p.m. this afternoon. It will be a long day. The first session will take stock of the current status of the ASEAN Power Grid by examining the key barriers to cross-border power and transmission projects, including policy, regulatory hurdles, technical and supply chain constraints, and environmental and social safeguard challenges. The discussion will highlight the most immediate actions needed over the next 12 months to accelerate APG implementation. We will be joined by esteemed panelists from the private sector, public sector, and ADB. Our second session will focus on the financing challenges of ASEAN Power Grid cross-border transmission projects, including gaps in project preparation, bankability, and risk allocation. Panelists will explore how PPP structures and blended finance solutions can strengthen risk mitigation and better align projects with commercial lender expectations. They will also identify opportunities for stronger coordination among stakeholders to crowd in private capital and accelerate implementation. Panelists from the private sector, public sector, and commercial banks will share insights on financing solutions for the region. Lastly, we will take a deeper look at pumped storage hydropower as a practical technology for addressing grid stability in cross-border energy trade. That will be in the afternoon. That discussion will bring together private sector investors, regulators, and industry experts to examine the role of pumped storage hydropower in enabling the ASEAN Power Grid as a shared regional flexibility asset. Discussions will focus on bankable structures, cross-border regulatory and policy barriers, and available risk mitigation solutions, while outlining a forward-looking pathway for scaling up pumped storage hydro deployment to support regional power integration across ASEAN. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Nyanshan Zhang, Director General of the Southeast Asia Department at ADB, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you. Good morning. ASEAN Secretariat Director Kanchanan, distinguished colleagues, partners, and friends, good morning, and a very warm welcome to Day 3 of Asian Clean Energy Forum 2026. For more than 2 decades, SAEF has been where ideas become partnerships and where partnerships move Asia's energy sector forward. This year's theme is Beyond Transition, Building Secure, Resilient, Inclusive, and Intelligent Energy Systems. It could not be more timely. Across Southeast Asia countries are accelerating their clean energy transition. They are making strong efforts to build the institutional, financial, and cross-border foundations for a sustainable, equitable energy future. It is also timely because the economic backdrop is now incredibly uncertain. Regional growth is slowing, geopolitical and trade tensions are rising, and the recent energy crisis is affecting millions of people across Southeast Asia and the world. Looking further ahead, Southeast Asia's energy demand is projected to triple by 2050, with more than 60% of the region's energy mix coming from fossil fuels. This heavy dependence underscores its unsustainability and exposes the region to significant vulnerabilities. At the Asian Development Bank, the main bank of ASEAN. We see three energy imperatives for Southeast Asia for the next decade: strengthening energy security, accelerating regional integration, and ensuring that the transition delivers benefits for all, from households and businesses to the most remote communities. All three imperatives are reinforcing ASEAN's vision of an ASEAN power grid, a fully integrated, interconnected system by 2040 with 18 gigawatts of cross-border transition capacity. This is a vital initiative. It moves us from isolated grids to a connected network, which helps balance supply and demand, unlock investment, and speed up the deployment of renewable energy. It is why ADB will invest up to $10 billion in the LPG during 2025 to 2034. It is also why we have partnered with ASEAN and the World Bank to lead the LPG financing initiatives, which strengthens coordination across financiers. And it is why power connectivity is a top priority across all of ADB regional, sub-regional, and country programs in Southeast Asia. Working with all stakeholders, including many of you in this room, we are seeing real LPG momentum. But we need to deliver more and at a greater speed. We need stronger institutions, established rules, and clearer pathways to make the private sector more confident to invest. That is what we will be expecting over the course of three panel discussions today. We will start by exploring the regulatory, technical, and E&S challenges for the ASEAN power grid and some promising solutions. We will then move on to discussing what makes LPG projects bankable and how to drive private investment into these critical initiatives. And we will end with a deep dive workshop into pumped storage hydropower deployment, examining why this is a vital tool for long-duration energy storage and how we can accelerate its deployment in ASEAN. Our aim today is to identify realistic, practical measures to move LPG to the next stage of growth, bankability, and implementation. Importantly, we want to take a forward-looking approach, shifting the discussion from what needs to be done to how we can meet this ambition. Thank you again to all our speakers and panelists for joining, for your leadership, for your partnership in accelerating the LPG agenda. I encourage the members of the audience to ask our panelists questions after their discussions. I look forward to the conversations ahead and to collaboration that will carry this work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyan Chang, for your inspiring message. Once again, we encourage everyone to join us through the third session to better understand the progress of the ASEAN Power Grid and identify opportunities for collaboration among stakeholders. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Kanchana Wanichkon, Director of the Sectoral Development Directorate at the ASEAN Secretariat, to deliver her keynote address. Thank you.
Very good morning, distinguished colleagues, delegates, development partners, ladies and gentlemen. I think before I begin, please allow me for a brief apologies. It's my voice not quite operating at full capacity this morning. Seems like have some transmission constraint of my own power system. But anyway, I'll try my best to go through the presentation, and I appreciate your patience if my voice might sound different today. the title for today's keynote, I think, accelerating the ASEAN Power Grid from ambition to implementation really reflects where ASEAN stands today. For more than 2 decades, believe it or not, since we start thinking about connecting our grids, today the question is no longer whether we should build the ASEAN Power Grid, but the question is, like Director Chang has mentioned, how quickly we can implement it. Where do I point? Okay, so the ASEAN Power Grid really sits at the heart of ASEAN vision. We have the new vision just launched earlier this year, and also our ASEAN economic strategic plan. It's not simply just electricity project. It's an energy security project. It's a competitiveness project, and it's really a regional integration project. So every interconnection we build would strengthen our economic resilience. We talk a lot about resilience now, and we help bring ASEAN closer together. So ASEAN already has all the institutions, needs to move forward. We have the ministers, the regulators, utilities, ASEAN Center for Energy, and ASEAN Secretariat. Apology for the acronyms, but my point is we have our institution ready. Our challenge is not creating a new institution, but it's accelerating the implementation. So why does interconnection matter? Because ASEAN energy resources is really complementary. You can see from the slides here. We have hydropower in the Mekong region, geothermal resources in Indonesia and the Philippines. We have solar and offshore wind in Vietnam. Also growing renewable energy across the region. So electricity does not need to be generated everywhere, but it needs to be available everywhere. And a connected grid would improve reliability, lower cost, enable renewable energy transition and integration, and also strengthen resilience against all this disruption. So most importantly is it would allow ASEAN to transform national energy strength into a shared regional advantage. So I think the urgency is very clear. ASEAN economy continue to grow around 4.5%, the latest number that ADB has just estimated from 4.9, but with this crisis now it's dropped to 4.5, which is not that bad. Electricity demand is also expected to increase by around 7% this year. It could be double or even triple by 2050. At the same time, ASEAN is experiencing major structural shift. Data center, we talk a lot about building data center for AI, for high performance computing, for quantum. It's coming up very quickly. Demand is expected to increase electricity by fourfold by 2035. Manufacturing investment continue to move to ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and countries are pursuing decarbonization while also strengthening energy security. So the trend is not just happening in sequence, but it's happening simultaneously. So in this context, the ASEAN Power Grid is not simply energy infrastructure, it's a strategic economic infrastructure. Without sufficient electricity, the growth itself becomes constrained. So just a little bit on the benefits side, you can see from the number, they are substantial. Several studies I put in reference has suggested a fully integrated APG could generate up to $3 trillion in additional economic value by 2050 and create around 1.45 million jobs. Consumer could also benefit from lower electricity prices through more efficient regional dispatch, and also regional interconnection could also reduce the cost of ASEAN decarbonization pathway. The study has estimated as much as $800 billion. So beyond this economics number, There's also a social dimension. Reliable, affordable electricity would support education, healthcare, digital connectivity, and opportunity for communities throughout ASEAN. So APG is not only about connecting grids, it's ultimately about connecting people to opportunity as well. As you can see in the slides, the good news is that ASEAN is not starting from zero. The APG has evolved significantly over time. We began with bilateral interconnection, and then we moved to multilateral cooperation, and the newly adopted ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation for 2026 to 2030, or we call APEAC, has placed great emphasis on regional connectivity, multilateral power trade, and also implementation of our new enhanced APG MOU. So I'm pleased to say that of those 18 original design cross-border interconnection, 9 of those 18 are already operational. Cross-border capacities stands approximately around 7.7 gigawatts now, and its strongest proof of concept is our LTMS, so Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project. It is the world's first operational 4-country electricity trading arrangement and has already delivered over 266 gigawatt hours of renewable energy electricity trade. So this really demonstrates that multilateral power trade is not a theory. It's already happening in the region. And we really look ahead that we're seeing strong momentum behind this new interconnection, and including major subsea HVDC project involving Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Vietnam. I don't have time. I have 5 minutes left. I know 4 minutes before they give me another 10 minutes. So I'm happy to come back with the detail of this project later. So our long-term vision is clear. ASEAN aim to increase cross-border capacity to around 7.6 gigawatts by 2040 and significantly increase our renewable energy development. So of course, challenges remain. We face regulatory fragmentation, commercial risk, permitting challenges, coordination complexity. I think you have a dedicated session discussing this later. But these are not unique to ASEAN. Every interconnected, integrated electricity market has faced similar challenges. So one lesson is quite clear from the experience is that I heard a lot when I come to ADB. They say that the money is not the problem. The world does not suffer from shortage of capital, but it suffers from shortage of bankable projects. ASEAN, together with ADB and World Bank, and we welcome all MDB and investor and financiers to help us advance APG. We start with our ASEAN Power Grid Financing Initiative, or APGF. So the APGF is designed to help project move from concept to finance close through better preparation, structuring, and also de-risking. And complementing to the APGF, we have PASS, the Partnership for ASEAN Connectivity on Energy. We'll have a meeting tomorrow, which will bring together MDBs, investor, and financier. So the goal of PASS is to connect project with finance and also reduce fragmentation in project preparation. Bankability, ultimately, my understanding is really depends on confidence. Confidence in governance, confidence in regulation, and confidence in implementation. So I already touched on this, APGF and PASS. And as you can see, the scale of investment required is significant, more than $100 billion by 2045. I saw you take some photo. I'll be happy to share all the slides with ADB, and you can download it later if you wish. So we do welcome support from our partners, including ADB. Director Chang has mentioned the 10 billion US dollars commitments for APG related investment, and also the World Bank has pledged 2.5 billion US dollar. I hope that the new 30 billion US dollars that was just announced for ADB to support ASEAN parity will also apply for APG related project as well. So I think that our challenge is now turn to how we turn all this commitment into investable project. So this is my last slide. Oh, how come they keep adding 1 minute to me? Okay. This is my last slide. I would take another minute. So allow me to conclude with 4 simple messages. Okay, the first one, we need harmonization. We need to harmonize regulations, accelerate implementation of enhanced APG MOU. Second, mobilizing finance, crowding private capital. And third, we really need to build priority interconnection, including next generation subsea power cable infrastructure as well. ADB and World Bank has been working on this. Hopefully that we could share with you some of the priority project, ready to invest project very soon. And fourth, last but not least, is on strengthened governance and regional cooperation. So, ladies and gentlemen, APG is no longer just simply an energy initiative. I have to highlight this. This is energy security. It's a competitiveness initiative. It also has social development and ultimately, it's an investment for ASEAN shared future. So I wish to thank you, and I would like to say once again that we spent 20 years, moving from concept into like agreement, into getting consensus to move forward. So I hope that it would not take another 20 years, but faster. We really need to build this interconnection. I believe technology has existed, economic also compelling, partnership are growing, so the time is really accelerating the implementation. The time is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Kanchana, for your insightful presentation. It was so insightful that they keep adding minutes to your time clock. We will now move to the panel discussion. I'd like to invite Mr. Anthony Maxwell, Principal Energy Specialist at ADB and moderator for this panel discussion, to introduce our panelist. Anthony, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuichiro. And good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this event. Good to see the large turnout this morning. So today's kickoff panel is titled The State of Play of the ASEAN Power Grid, Progress and Barriers. So as introduced, my name is Anthony Maxwell. I'm a Principal Energy Specialist with ADB based in Jakarta. So I'm heavily involved in the APG discussions on a day-to-day basis. So this is a topic very close to my heart. Today we're going to try and take stock of the current status of the APG, have a look at where we are and what has worked well to inform us for the future, then talk through some risks and roadblocks, actual risks that we've faced, but also potential risks that we see in the future, and then how to address those risks and those roadblocks. So today's session will be conversational in nature. There will be no PowerPoint slides. We have half an hour, 40 minutes to go through some of the core discussions. So looking forward to the discussions. And there will be question times at the end. So please either use your WOVA app to list the questions and we can select from them, or please stand up. There'll be microphones circulated later and you can ask questions then. So I'm joined today by a fairly esteemed panel from right across the industry, and I'll introduce them one by one and ask them to come up to stage. So firstly, we have Asad Razouk, who is the CEO of Gurin Energy. Gurin is a pan-Asia renewable energy company headquartered in Singapore that develops, owns and operates solar, wind and storage assets right across Asia. And it has about an 8 gigawatt pipeline of projects at various stages of development. So please welcome Asad to the stage. Secondly, we have Beatrice Gomez, who is Director of the Office of Safeguards at ADB. More specifically, Beatrice is the Director of the Pacific and Interregional Non-Sovereign Operations, and she leads on policy oversight and delivering ADB's safeguard requirements. So please welcome Beatrice. Thirdly, we have Giacomo Rizzi, who is the Regional Director of Oceania and Southeast Asia, Submarine and HV for Prysmian Group. Prysmian is headquartered in Italy, and it is a leader in energy and telecom cable industry, specialising in underground submarine power cables, medium low voltage cables and fibre optic cables for data transmission. Giacomo is focused on driving the growth and execution of this sector across global markets, currently based in Singapore and serves as their regional director. Please welcome Giacomo. Fourthly, someone who I know a lot of you will know, we have Benny Suryadi, who is a senior manager at ASEAN Centre for Energy. Benny leads the ASEAN-wide coordination of energy cooperation and transition initiatives, including the ASEAN Plan for Action for Energy Cooperation, and he is also co-head of the ASEAN Power Grid Secretariat. Please welcome Benny. And lastly, who I'm sure a lot of people you know as well, is Jackie Sutani, who is our Regional Director at the Singapore with ADB, Singapore office. Jackie leads efforts to deepen coordination between ADB and the Singapore government and in the financial sector, as well as exploring opportunities for private and public projects across the region. So please join me in welcoming everybody. Okay, so let's start. What I would like to do to open is to have a bit of a setting question, a little bit of a looking back question. We were here at a similar event about a year ago, and since then there's been a lot of progress. So we've seen a lot of actual projects get traction. We've seen a lot of government commitments to the APG. So looking back, maybe I'll just ask the panel, each of you, to reflect a little bit about what you've seen in terms of progress over the last year, what has been delivered and what we have done well, and what successes you've seen in the space. Then I'd like you to flip it around and consider what we underestimated, what we didn't see coming, what blindsided us as we were working this year. So a little bit of a backward-looking reflection on the last year and what's worked well and what we didn't see coming. So maybe I can start from my left, Giacomo, if you'd like to comment.
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, indeed. During the past year, we have seen things evolving. Positively, and also with the recognition, which is still positive, of some issues which were maybe underestimated in the past. The momentum of the ASEAN Power Grid is clear. Okay, the APG has been on the table since more than 20 years. We know that as cable manufacturers, and all the players around the region are very well aware of that. Certainly, in the last years, there was a ramp up in the activities. There was a higher focus. The chairmanship of Malaysia in ASEAN definitely helped also the progress of the projects. So yes, I see that on the positive side there is this good momentum that the APG has gained across the private and the public sectors. What did we realize as overall industry or overall stakeholders? We realized that there is more than technical feasibility or financial availability or pure commercial convenience when it comes to interconnector projects. I think that we all realize that an interconnected region, which means a stronger region, is a vision that starts as a political priority, a political target. So definitely the governments need to align first, to agree, to understand, perceive this as a common priority, and therefore drive the interconnection between networks. I wouldn't see this as a negative, as a downside of the last year, but is certainly a consciousness that came up very, very strongly in the past year.
Thank you. I guess from our side on environmental and social risk management, the past years we've been able to support very large utility scale projects on the downstream side. I guess that supports this whole program. And we've been able to work with very good development partners who have kept environment and people centered to their success. I guess one thing that at this point we might want to consider that we might be underestimating is the scale and complexity of environmental and social risks in these types of projects that are so large and involve multiple countries. And so that's something that we might want to bring to the fore in this coming year and search for common approaches, make sure we're considering it early in the process, as early as possible, so we don't put our, bet against ourselves and have challenges on the downstream. We put everything on the upstream side, try to look at strategic approaches and common approaches between key stakeholders, and try to get, I guess, things streamlined as much as possible. So that would be something that we might be underestimating that we can actually act on.
Thank you. I want to start in China just for a second, and then move back to ASEAN, if that's okay. So if you look at what the Chinese have built over the last 20 years of the ASEAN cable, ASEAN power grid story, what you'll see is that they built 45 ultra-high voltage transmission lines that transmit power all across the country. The rest of the world together built two. And ASEAN in particular is probably the one that's got an incredible amount of potential, but is really sleeping at the wheel. Probably the most spectacularly of all regions around the world. And we're only just waking up, and I don't think we're waking up with an adequate sense of urgency at all. And what's happened in the last year is that in addition to everything else, we now have an AI sovereignty super race between the Chinese and the Americans. We have an incredible national security need to build data centers in ASEAN locally, to power them locally with our own power, and to have our own compute and large language models. And as I frequently have argued, we aren't doing, as far as I can see, any of that. I mean, we just simply are not. And I think a far more intense sense of urgency has to be communicated to all the stakeholders. In terms of the Asian power grid in particular, I mean, I wrote down 3 things, but to be honest, I mean, there's just so many that you can write. We keep putting kind of cables before rules, and we have to stop doing that. We've got to put rules before cables. You know, we, the private developers, can't underwrite cross-border transmission risks when the national grid codes are a mess and are unharmonized and aren't talking to each other. There's like there's a very big ask of the private sector that needs to be, I think, addressed head on. So put rules before cables. And I haven't seen much actual concrete action on that front. Then we have to address the issue that we have stagnating monopolies in the utility sector in some of our ASEAN countries, and therefore a built-in system which is actually against the Asian power grid by DNA, so to speak. And I think you have to call a spade if you want to address a problem. I mean, I can think of Thailand and Indonesia as two examples where it's really uphill for that reason. And then we have to also align clean energy with digital security infrastructure, because clean energy is no longer just electricity. It's also a national security issue. Electricity demand, as previously described, is going to triple over the next few years in this part of the world. And where is that electricity going to come from? It's all going to come from solar, wind, and storage. And where is that solar, wind, and storage if we don't build an ASEAN power grid that actually talks to each other, so that the demand and supply is harmonized and maximized? I'm going to stop here, but I could go on for quite a while. So,
morning, everyone. Very difficult to follow my friend Assad here, but I'm going to try and address Anthony's question. So, to start off with, where do I see the positive momentum? I think, we've seen clearly across countries, we've seen certainly with my institution, the Asian Development Bank, true commitment to the ASEAN power grid. And that should not be underestimated, because I think this whole topic of an ASEAN power grid has been talked about for the last 30 years. But personally, I have not seen this kind of energy amongst ASEAN members, starting off in Malaysia, now here in the Philippines. And as we all know, next year, the ASEAN chair is in Singapore. I loved Dr. Kanchana's presentation. You've got all of these projects from different parts of ASEAN, but there's only one in your presentation, there's only one demand hub. I hope there's more than one demand hub, but the key demand hub is Singapore. So I think there is a lot of positive impetus. My Director General, Nyan Shan, talked about the ADB's commitment for $10 billion. So I think there's a lot of positivity. To your point about what did we underestimate, I moved to Singapore 3 years ago. And we were very lucky that we worked with the Energy Market Authority on their desire to import 6 gigawatts. And I personally thought in the first year, we're going to do our first project. Clearly, we are not there yet. And again, I agree with a lot of the challenges that Assad is referring to. But again, I think we're kind of, all of us maybe reflecting on this last night, we're beating ourselves up a little bit too much. More and more, and I'm looking at my colleague Scott Roberts, who, again, on the ADB, we've created a dedicated unit on the ASEAN power grid. When we go out with his team and start learning what people did in Europe and the US, it's okay, they've created an integrated system, but it's taken a long, long time. And, talking to some people from Europe, they still say it's not working perfectly. So let's not beat ourselves up too much. I'm an optimist. I really think that, again, I'm going to borrow Dr. Kanchana's, the time is now. So if we all come together, there are a lot of challenges, but I think there's good potential to focus in the next couple of years and hopefully get 1 or 2 things done. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good morning, everyone. Thank you, ADB UK, for convening us this morning for this important discussion. And in the last 1 year, I think it's a lot of progress, but not all can be seen. So I think from us is fully understand that the general public's opinion that the ASEAN Power Grid is still not as fast as expected to progress. But I would like to emphasize, echo what earlier Dr. Kanchana mentioned, that for many years, the discussion is on the projects, mainly on the list of the connection projects that we have. It's still a very important discussion, but I can also share the conversation is now become more practical. I mean, this is what I also mentioned as well, that's a lot of things need to be understand on what rules do we need, what planning process do we need, what technical standard are required, or how do we make these projects bankable, and etc. etc. So recently, we published 4 part of the AIMS-3 report, the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan studies, looking on the multiple power trades, with the support from UNOPS, UTP, SCAP, and EU. We release studies based on heavily consulted with the ASEAN member states. One study is looking into the minimum requirement for multilateral power trades, including the transmission pricing, third-party access, capacity allocation, and etc. Another report is examining ASEAN-wide integrated resource and resilient planning, so that interconnection projects can be accessed not only from the national perspective, but also from the regional one. And there is also a studies examines minimum technical standard and grid code harmonization, so that finally bring all of this together into implementation strategy for multilateral power trades. To the question is what is underestimate? If I may also, not in defensive modes, but it's not underestimated, but it takes more time for the ASEAN, for the policymakers to really understand what's happening, what is the real issue that we are encountering. On regulatory and institutional risk, for example, we may see this project is commercially attractive, but there's need to be addressed more than that. I mean, there's still need clarity on licensing, tariff treatment, cost recovery, willing charge, and dispute resolution. And another one on the technical harmonization risk. So there is still need for us to, particularly for the countries, because currently not all yet define the country interconnector clearly in the domestic grid codes. So it's need more understanding that how this could be aligned, so we can talk, as I mentioned, that frequency, voltage protections is not just putting the cables. Thank you.
Thank you all. Some really useful insights there. Let's switch gears now a little bit to look at some specific risks and barriers. There's a lot we could choose from, but I'm going to focus in on about 3 or 4. I'd like to kick off with some supply chain risks. But before I do that, just when you answer to all on the panel, specific examples are good, specific situations are good. I think they're the things that people remember. So looking forward to some sort of sharp, I wouldn't say critical, but don't be afraid to bring out your concerns and your things that keep you awake at night. So on supply chain risks, maybe if I can turn to Giacomo to begin with, given that you're in the industry of supply. What we're seeing is obviously a massive global surge in demand for HVDC subcables and cables in general. One issue that we have in ASEAN is obviously that manufacturing slots get locked down by other regions. So I'd just like to get your perspective on what the industry is doing about this and how they're responding. And also how you see, what do you think ASEAN regions should be doing? What's the key things that they could do to get ahead of the competition in this space? Thanks.
Thanks, Anthony. Allow me in saying we consider ourselves in Prysmian rather than on the supply side of the chain, on the solution providing side. We see it a bit more enlarged. Jokes apart, indeed, 2022, 2023 were years when an unprecedented raise in demand when it comes to cable interconnectors hit the industry, mostly coming from, I would say, the same targets that ASEAN countries see and have. In Europe, the 2030 carbon neutral target was pressed on top of the TSOs, and they came to the market and they wanted to secure production slots to complete their interconnector projects. How did the industry reacted? Basically, the industry, as it happened in the past, reacted investing. So I talk for Prysmian, but everybody had the same trend. We invested about 3 billion euro in new capacity, factories, expansion, and new installation vessels. And again, we are not the only one. All in all, I would say that the global capacity in the cable industry doubled in the past years. At the same time, as we know, the vast majority of submarine projects and interconnector projects in the US declined for other reasons. So I would say that the industry and the market has now reached a demand which is not necessarily decreasing, but is stable, has stabilized, and we do see the industry capable of addressing the demand that we see at global level from the energy transition point of view. What is that? What is necessary here? I will copy the comment and the point from Hassad, and I say that rules shall come before cables. So the first thing that you want to do is strategically planning interconnection projects, which means involving all the stakeholders since the very early stages, especially what we call the enabling ecosystem, which means authorities, permitting authorities, and the political bodies, financiers, insurance companies, at the very early stage of the planning of the project, and then involve at very early stages, so also the early involvement of key players, can be the suppliers, the technical OEMs that shall and the contractors that shall be part of the project shall be properly involved for a planning which fits the specific project, considering its needs in timing, the realistic timeline for permits, financing, and so on and so forth. This way, of course, you can access slots which are realistic, and then we see today the industry can address. Clearly, when the demand is very high, for the risking of the project execution, it is good to pre-book or pre-agree well in advance the use of strategic assets such as factories for cables, for converters, and so on, and marine vessels. I would say that this should help a smoother and how to say realistically schedulable execution of the projects.
Yeah, thanks, Giacomo. Maybe Benny, if I can turn to you to give a little bit of a perspective on the supply chain and the regional approach. So what sort of regional mechanisms? I know you do a lot of work in this space at ACE, whether it's for data sharing, system planning, or joint procurement. Where do you see the key areas are from a regional perspective to address some of these supply chain risks?
All right. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion, and again, I love when you're saying that the rules before the cables. That's why we're trying now. It could be like, although to be honest, that we are doing the same, the two things at the same time. It's going to be like we are working on the cables, We are working on the feasibility study for a number of the potential projects with the support from the ADB, World Bank, AFD. Currently, we are engaging the utilities and on to conduct the feasibility studies to make these projects happen. But rules before cables must be put in place. So that's where we are also working on addressing the challenge on the harmonizing the regulatory at the ASEAN side. It's going to be definitely supply chains is one of the major issues that we need to encounter. But again, before that, there is urgently need for the ASEAN is also to address the harmonization of these rules. From the study that I mentioned earlier, that we identified there is a need for ASEAN to have a minimum market and regulatory architects before we scale up this multi-country electricity trading. So there is a work that we are working on the area of regulatory treatment of the cross-border interconnection. We need a clearer rules. This is the support that we also get from the ADB on how the interconnection are licensed, owned, operated, and recovered through the tariff. That we also working on the transmission pricing and wheelings. This is again the rule that you need to clear it before this project is coming in. And third-party access and capacity allocation, because if you want to move it beyond bilateral tradings into multi-country tradings, participants need clarity on who can access the grids, how available capacity is calculated, and how the capacity is allocated in fair and non-discriminative way. With the ADBs also, we are working one of the studies, regional power markets, to see that how this also possible. And last but not least is system operation and technical compatibility. So with all of this, that I mean, it's going to be like we'll be able for us ASEANs in responding to the supply chains coordination. That's going to be like we know that long lead equipment, cable, HVAC converters, transformer, and grid control system require the early plannings. So from us, that we are proposing to have a clearer regional project pipeline that will help manufacturer, financier, and development partner to prepare better. And this is what we're also doing through the PACE, where we identified what is the projects that may coming for the next few years, 5 years, 10 years. So everyone's, including the manufacturer, will have a better picture on how to respond to these needs for the region. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Benny. Certainly a lot of work going on today in the space. Maybe if I can flip it to Assad, because I know you're directly exposed to some of the supply chain risks.
Yeah, can I just categorically state that there are no supply chain risks? So none whatsoever. I haven't seen any. We operate in Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea, and there are no supply chain risks. That is kind of completely not the issue. ASEAN is super lucky because it's close to China, and the Chinese have about 3 times what the world requires as a manufacturing capacity across our industry, solar, wind, and storage. And to be honest, it's really just as simple as that. Now, maybe we're helped by the snail's speed of projects at the moment in the APG. Maybe that's a help, but we haven't seen any problems. And none of the procurement exercises that we have undertaken have indicated any supply chain issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, excellent perspective. Let's switch now back to the regulatory constraints. We touched a bit on it before about policy before cables. Maybe if I could stay with you, Assad. Could you talked a little bit about it before, but it'd be good to get some specifics around regulatory constraints, whether they're within country or between countries for the cross-border projects, the ones that most directly are slowing you down at the moment.
Okay, so you've got both. So one of the projects we're working on is a cross-border project between Indonesia and Singapore. Just to put that into perspective, I think there are 150 separate permits to be obtained in Indonesia. 150, each one of which requires navigating a particular permitting landscape and multiple ministries and agencies with really no central point of coordination. This is in a world where, in effect, these renewable energy projects are borrowing Singapore's balance sheet free of charge to bring $50 billion of FDI into Indonesia combined, right? So that's twice more FDI than the country receives per year, and these days it's probably 3 or 4 times more FDI. Yet, you have to navigate these permits. Then, when you cross the border, there is no harmonization yet. Even though the Singapore Strait is one of the busiest straits in the world, and I would imagine that all these routes are already there, right? And that the environmental, for example, surveys have already been conducted for telecom cables and however many cables there are already. And then you get to the Singapore side. We also looked, just to give another example, at a project from Laos all the way down to Thailand with some aspirational hope for it to then continue to move down to Malaysia and Singapore. And it's the same issue, right? It's the issue of, and that's just the permits. That's not deliberate regulatory slowdown that you also encounter because people just don't want to do something. I hope that answers the question.
No, thank you for that. Maybe if I can flick over to Jackie. So there is gaps, obviously. There are layers of regulations that need to be revised, but there has been some progress. So where have you seen, in your dealings with the various governments of the region, where have you seen the progress, but where do you see the biggest gaps between the commitment that we're hearing from the governments and the actual implementation of those regulatory reforms?
So thanks, Anthony. And you asked me to point to specific examples. So I'm looking at Kunpek and Kunnat from Monsoon Wind, which ADB was honored to finance their cross-border project, which now, interestingly, is being talked about as a model ASEAN power grid project because it connected Laos to Vietnam. But I mean, to your point, right? And Kunpek, you'll remember this. There was a stage of the discussions where they needed to go and speak to EVN. And I think I got a call 24 hours before and said, come to Vietnam right now. You as ADB leading the transaction need to explain to EVN that we need these transmission lines up and ready by the time Monsoon finishes their construction. Otherwise, we can't get financing. And this is exactly the kind of role ADB plays, right? So it's not only about our money, but it's really our relationships with governments. And look, we could spend the entire day about all the kind of challenges we have. And some of the points that Asad is referring to are genuine. And they're things that we need to unblock. I mean, again, I'll give you one particular example. Actually, the low-hanging fruit is really selling power from the Riau Islands, which are only 42 kilometers away from Indonesia to Singapore, right? And Assad's project is one of those projects. But at the moment, we have an issue where Singapore have issued a 25-year import license, and the current regulation in Indonesia is a 5-year export license. Now, this is again what we need to resolve. And I'm going to just maybe end off again in saying, look, for ADB, these kind of complex challenges require solutions. And the guy who has set up the introduction of all of this, Mr. Yuichiro Yoi, is probably one of the best project finance bankers I've ever met. So I'm looking at him and people like him to solve some of these challenges that we're facing. So people like Ganesh, who's from DBS, can join us in these projects because we need the commercial banks. But look, we can go on and on about challenges, but my point is, you take a problem and we solve it, and that's what we did on Monsoon. We got it done. They're operational. Why can't we do it again? Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Maybe Benny, to flip back to you as well on the and specifically on the regional harmonisation. I think both the two presenters then just mentioned it, the need for harmonisation across borders. Where does ACE see the most need to get regulatory harmonisation across borders? There's a myriad of steps required, but where do you see the low-hanging fruit, the first ones that need to be addressed to move forward?
Thank you. Maybe I responded by saying under the new enhanced APG MOU that we had last year, where the 10 or 11, the ASEAN member states put a higher commitment to accelerate this ASEAN power grids. So the ASEAN established a task force. We call it APG Task Force, where consists of the representative from the APGCC, the ASEAN Power Grid Consultative Committee, and second is representative from EARN, the ASEAN Energy Regulatory Body, and last but not least is the representative from the HAPWA, the head of the ASEAN Power Utilities and Authority. Three bodies that Director Kanchana put in the screen before for anyone to learn the abbreviation in the ASEAN context. But these three key stakeholders from the APG task force, and this APG task force divided into three subjects. One is on policy, another one on regulatory, and then the last one on the technicals. So the main jobs of this task force to identify that what all of the issue. I mean, it's going to be like eventually to creating a protocol for harmonization for all of this regulatory issue that we have been in the context of the wheeling charge, governance, and grid codes, etc., etc. And this, I mean, it's going to be ASEAN is putting commitment on that one. This APG task force working in the very short timelines, 1 year, maximum 2 years. They need to come out with these protocols, the output on regulatory harmonizing all of this regulatory issue that we have with this. Jay mentioned, as I mentioned, we will have a long list of that, but point of it is going to be is a very high commitment, a right and dedicated peoples being put under this APG task force to address all of this issue, particularly on harmonization of the policy and regulatory. So where ACE as a secretariat is playing a role is also supported by the ASEAN secretariats. So we working together to help the countries in not making a same language to everyone, but making this regulation in one country is able to communicate and find the synergy with others in the region. So as I mentioned, there is this kind of thing that can be addressed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Benny. So I'd like now to shift gear to talk about safeguards. I might start by passing it back to Assad as to talk about his experience in delivery, and then turn over to Beatrice for some perspectives from the ADB space. So Assad, safeguards are essential to get a project moving, and if you don't get it right in terms of biodiversity, land acquisition, community buy-in, it can delay projects. So across your pipeline, what do you see as the major bottlenecks? What gives you the most difficulty in terms of delivering projects in ASEAN, and maybe some examples of how you've mitigated that and what works well?
Big question. Look, I want to start somewhere else. I just want to say that I completely agree with the point Jackie just made on ADB and its ability to actually move the needle on the ground. Its number one value add by far is not the money, actually. It's the trust that governments have in it. And I think that's a critical intervention that should be used, if anything, more often. So taking that straight into safeguards, I just want to raise an issue, which is that there's a gap at the moment between IFC and ADB, which has the risk of becoming a bit of a headache for all of us, and that is precisely on biodiversity standards. So IFC's got a framework which sort of works, but ADB recently updated its biodiversity standard, and we think, by the way, Gurin is kind of an ultra of environmental compliance. We work super closely with communities for years to make sure that everything is done actually on the highest possible standards, and we're quite obsessive about it and have a big team doing it as well. And we do it, and we tie everybody's pay in the company to that as well. So we literally deduct from people's salaries if we don't perform on this very topic. So just to say that we take it ultra seriously, but I think, so practically speaking, navigating the environmental approvals is always challenging. It doesn't matter which country it is, but you can do it. You know, you just be methodical, and you take your time and you spend the money that's required. And it works. But the biodiversity standards, and this is what we've been doing in multiple countries in any case, but we are concerned about the ADB biodiversity standards and how they will actually play out in practice, and what the level of understanding is of teams on the ground with them. Because they potentially basically put on objectives that can't actually be delivered. And then that would just stop the ADB involvement in a project for what essentially is like a non-reason compared to what the IFC standards might be. I mean, I think we probably need a drink for that conversation, but I just thought I'd put it out there.
No, thanks. Always good to hear the practical limitations. Beatrice, so you're in charge of those practical limitations. Maybe just from a higher level, and you can address that if it comes in. But APG transmission lines have difficult to say if they're more complicated than some of our other projects, because we have some fairly complicated projects. But long linear lines through often you have lots of land acquisition issues. You have lots of environmental constraints. Just briefly, what do you see some of the larger issues that you've come across in terms of APG-related projects, and some of the ways that I guess ADB can bring in our safeguard support to make projects more bankable earlier on and address some of these issues, so it actually pushes the schedule forward on the projects?
Thanks. First off, I'll take your offer for a drink and we can talk about biodiversity. But just to say though, we are now more aligned with IFC's performance standards than ever before with the new environmental and social framework. There are slight differences, but we also know that IFC is under the process of updating their performance standards. But where there are differences, we're trying to figure out on-the-ground solutions for that, and happy to workshop that more closely. So for APG projects in particular, there's a few flashpoints, right? So there's land use, land acquisition, there's biodiversity, and there's community impacts. So with land use and land acquisition, you're looking at competing against where you're going to use areas for food growing or agriculture, looking at areas where it was forested and undeveloped, or areas that are essential to the livelihoods of communities. For biodiversity impacts, you're looking at large linear infrastructure projects, which may cause habitat fragmentation, barrier effects for wildlife movement, and you're also looking at maybe a lot of clearance of habitat. And then you have community impacts, where you're looking at maybe impacts to indigenous peoples and their way of life, and also rural communities, and where there could be an argument to say there some parts of the community are bearing a disproportionate amount of the cost of a project than where the benefits flow regionally. So these things are not new. That's in almost every complex infrastructure project we have, right? But the difference is scale, and also where we're developing corridors of these renewable energy projects. And so what do we do, right? We now, traditionally, we look at safeguards, and it's a downstream process. It's project by project. We try to do the best we can to meet the compliance requirements. But now I think we have to shift from compliance to strategic engagement, where we look at policies and how we can work with the governments to figure out ways to deliver projects which are worthy projects. These are important projects for the region. But how do we do it that we don't sacrifice, the other important parts of our region? And that's where the trick is, and where all of our, very smart, competent people, we can try and figure out a way to do that. So we balance that out. So one example, just bringing in a project example, a program example, is most recently we've been working with the Lao PDR government, where we're looking at, so we've had some issues with big infrastructure projects, and how do we implement biodiversity offsets in a successful way. The Lao PDR regulations actually have inbuilt the mitigation hierarchy in the regulations. So firstly, obviously, all the time, we look at avoidance of high-risk areas. If you can't avoid, you minimize, and if you can't minimize, you restore, and then you only look at offsets at the end. Now, offsets are particularly tricky. They're very hard to do. We try to avoid it as much as possible if we can, because success is it's not too successful, because it takes a really long time and a lot of partners to do. So we try to avoid it as much as possible. For Lao PDR in that context, we've now been working with them, and we proposed a national aggregate biodiversity offset framework, where we work with the government to look at areas of the country that are scientifically, using scientific survey methods to figure out where your hotspots of biodiversity are and where the conservation areas would likely be. And in those areas, we might be able to use some of these areas as offsets for big infrastructure projects where we can't avoid impacts to high-risk areas. And that way it's streamlined. The private developer doesn't have to make their own offset and run an offset, which is really very hard. And you'd have a professional agency running the offset, guided by the government, but overseen by an independent committee as well. And that's something we're working on. It's still brand new, but that's an example of an upstream strategic engagement that involves the DMCs our partners, technical conservation groups, technical partners, but also the private sector partners. And that's a discussion I think we'll have to have more often.
Anthony, can I just
Yeah,
add?
please, Jackie.
So I just want to say, as a practitioner of ADB's safeguards team, and having worked with Beatrice and her colleague Joyce on many projects, I think before I joined ADB, I was an investment banker, and safeguards, what was that, right? But after joining ADB, I think MDBs get, and it's very important, Assad, we want to listen to clients' feedback. So thank you very much for that. But I think MDBs get an unnecessarily hard time on safeguards. And what I see with commercial banks, and I'm again looking at my friend Ganesh here from DBS, but I think there was Satya from SMBC, and there are a lot of commercial banks. Today, the commercial banks also are very focused on safeguards, and they're really looking to leadership from the MDBs. It's not that, so maybe we sometimes get, we're the bad guys, but actually they need it, the commercial banks need it as much as we need it. And I think with equity and debt, and I like your comment about, your staff salary get deducted if they don't comply. That's great, because actually we're very aligned in a lot of things. You want a project that is good for the community, that you don't have complaints from the community. And people like Beatrice and the safeguards team, and my boss over there was the former head of safeguards, right? We're trying to help. And so I think it's a very important topic, but we should be involved on these APG projects much earlier so that these projects are beneficial for all. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. No, very interesting and insightful comments. We will now move to some closing comments, and then we'll have another 10 minutes after that for Q&A. So hopefully everyone can think of some questions as they're sitting there. For the closing remarks, I'll throw to the panel individually with some framing questions, but I guess what I'm really after is some takeaway messages that you want the audience to remember. So and it can be something you've already mentioned, you've already talked about, but the sort of the short, sharp messages that you would like people to take away with them today and remember from this session. So I guess from my ADB colleagues, so what is that single most important message you want to take away, possibly about how ADB can, and MDBs in general, can support the APG moving forward? And/or what are the most critical items that you see to move the APG forward? I know it's a large question, but it should give you the opportunity to reach into your whatever you think is the most important. Thanks. So maybe Jackie, if you'd like to start.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. So I think the whole theme of today is moving from concept really to implementation. And I think there's a bit of a debate going on at the moment when you talk to different people on this whole APG topic. Should we be talking about all of ASEAN and a big program, getting everybody integrated, getting everything correct, or should we just get some projects done? I think there is, I think there is some truth to both. Right? We do need to look at the big picture. We do need to make sure that things are done properly. But I mean, I use this comment about I'm going to retire very soon. So I want to make sure that we actually get some things done. And certainly I know there's great impetus from the Asian Development Bank to actually get, we've made these great announcements, which I think are super important. But I think also now it's very key that we actually get some of these projects done. So I think, and we need everybody's help. This is not only about ADB, it's our financial partners, it's about, Giacomo from Prismian, but, our private sector developers like Gurun, the banks, everybody to pick one or two projects that we can get done in the next couple of years. And again, this is the great thing about ADB. We're agnostic. We don't care which one gets done, but I think we need some momentum. Otherwise, what I'm worried about is in 5 years' time, people are going to say, you know, here these guys go again. They were talking about ASEAN Power Grid. Nothing happened. So I think really we need to seize the moment. The impetus is there, and let's go and do it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Beatrice, over to you.
Yes, so I guess echoing Jackie with trying to figure out what our priorities are. So from the environmental and social risk management point of view, we're going to have to look at upstream strategic engagement, and that's going to take time and a lot of heads to figure out the right solution for each context. So if we know what the priorities are, then, you know, as a group, then we can start working out what to work on. So then the downstream is a lot easier than it is right now when we're doing a project by project approach. You know, I guess the concerns around cost and delays, around safeguards, these are valid concerns, but it's mostly around timing, and that's because we come in at the end. So let's try and put it at the start as early as possible. We're looking to you as the leaders of this initiative to tell us what are the priorities, and then we come up with a solution that's strategic and programmatic. So I guess get us involved now. That's what I would say.
Very good. And over to Benny, I think, for just some last reflections from ACE's perspective. ACE has a lot of different central roles, but in the next phase, do you have a favourite, or you have a priority, something you think is more important than the others?
Thank you. That's going to be just the same spirit with everyone to speed up these APG's projects. Jackie wanted before retire. Is that the next 5 years or 10 years? But in the practical term, I mean, it's going to be for us is the way to do is trusted data sharings, coordinated regional planning, power trade simulation, and pilot trading, of course, a feasible investment pipeline. So if ASEAN can strengthen this, APG, we believe delivery will become faster, more credible, and more attractive for both public and private investment. And ACE, as we get a mandate as a APG secretariat, we should be able to provide technical evidence, coordinated APG work streams, support progress tracking and follow-up, and mobilize partner for the project's preparation, capacity building, and financing support. But this is something that we cannot do alone. I mean, we need everyone in these rooms. So wherever you are looking at each individual projects, or you are looking on the regional more collaboration, using what Jay said, please talk to us. I mean, it's going to be please connect with us. We will be very happy to get more and more support. So this is something that everyone should be part of it, but in more coordinated manner. So please feel free to reach us or also with the ASEAN Secretariat. Thank you.
Thanks. And just down with Assad, maybe from Gurin's perspective, if Pillsbury, please feel free to bring in your key point, but it might be interesting to know what you would like to see from the government's perspective in terms, and from ADB's support perspective in terms of regulatory reform. I think that seems to be a key activity over the next year. Thanks.
You know, I have a podcast called The Angry Clean Energy Guy. There's a lot of that material there, but look, if you wanted to build an Asian power grid, right, what would you do? First, we need corridors that are pre-designated between countries so that the permit is smooth. Second, we need zones where we can build solar and wind projects, which ideally are also designated, and they can be, and it's pretty clear when you look at ASEAN where they should be, right? And then third, we need marine corridors that are also designated. If you had a fast permit desk within the ASEAN Secretariat that's coordinating this kind of an effort, you would be able to pull it off the ground much faster, because then you don't have to worry about anything else, right? And you move away from all the land speculation issues that occur, all the permitting bottlenecks that can occur. And these days, you kind of have to do this because it's become a national security imperative. I mean, we're in the middle of fossil fuel wars. The world is burning, right? And so every country's got sovereign energy in solar, wind, and storage. And China's got all the supply that you need, plus they're willing to come in and build domestic manufacturing. It's like, you know, what else are we waiting for?
Thanks. And from Prismian's perspective, I guess, are there any priority actions that you would like to see from the ASEAN region that would make your job easier?
These interconnection projects are not easy projects. The one of the first time we met with Jakey, his sentence of, okay, there are some projects from Indonesia which are low-hanging fruits, and this was at least 2 years ago, struck me, and I said, Indonesia is close, but it doesn't mean that these projects are easy. So I wouldn't say that the execution, implementation of the projects can be eased up by political decisions, but the interconnectors themselves are a political decision. As Asad said, pre-designated corridors or areas for generation and transmission of power are a political decision. So now, what can ADB do to ease up this decision or this consciousness from the governments is acting as what ADB is, and this was coming up today also, which is not just an association that lends money to Asian countries, is an organization that is built on and leverages on trust from the different countries. So keep doing, I would say, what you are doing, a sort of ambassadors of each other's needs within the ASEAN region. And then the money are important, but they're not the critical factors for the APG.
Excellent. No, thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our question time. Sorry, the end of our discussions. We have 5 to 10 minutes of question time remaining, and a few hands have gone up already, which is good. So I think I'll prefer to start with the audience, and then we can flip to the online if required. So do we have, I think we have some microphones set up. If you'd just like to stand up and walk to the microphones. If you could just introduce yourself and where you're from, and if you could keep it to one question, that would be useful for our time management. Thanks.
In large-scale infrastructure projects, it is inevitable that the environment and social conditions will change, and that will affect existing life forms and way of lives. So besides just thinking about how to reduce the negative impacts of that, what is the possibility of moving thinking to the range where to the range of benefits of new ecosystems? Because new ecosystems that will be created, which will support new life forms and new ways of life, new ways of work. So does discussion currently get there, or is it still largely at the level of minimizing the negative impacts? Thank you.
Shall I respond? Yeah, okay. Thank you for your question. At the moment, discussion is around mostly negative impacts and minimizing or avoiding those, because there's still a lot to consider. but there are studies and pilot projects for different renewable energy projects. I don't know from your end yet, but I do know, like, for example, a nearshore offshore wind projects where we're looking at design features that actually add to the richness of the ecosystem, which is important, right? Because usually in these areas, in the nearshore environment, you also have fisheries that are competing with that. So there are some technologies and pilot projects that are looking at how you use the renewable energy project and with a benefit to the ecosystem. And in some studies, we've actually found that there are more fish types in these types of, in one area anyway that was studied, than it was at the baseline. So there are things to think about. One of the other things to think about, especially in Indonesia and in the Philippines, where food security is also very important. We should be thinking about agrovoltaics and how do we integrate, food security measures into our renewable energy space. So there's a few things going around, and hopefully ADB will be one of the ones that will help the positive end and not just look at how to avoid negative impacts, but actually amplify positive impacts.
Thanks, Beatrice. Next question.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for the informative discussion. So I know you said one question. Apologies, I'm going to make it very quick with two questions. One from Ms. Beatrice. The ADB has always had this, or has recently issued some studies with regards to how the new crisis or the climate change crisis or the heat waves have been affecting communities, especially women communities. What is one policy or wish list policy that you would like to implement now to make it easier for you to implement this project? And number two, this question is actually for the entire panel. Yesterday, there was news stating that there was an NGO that has been sort of, I wouldn't say it's anti-ADB, but they have been saying that ADB stopped fueling the crisis, meaning they seem to have this idea that the ADB has been pushing forward projects with regards to fossil fuels, which we know, as given by Mr. Jackie, is not the commitment of ADB now. Is there a miscommunication between how the ADB is presenting itself to the community at the very least? Because this is one of the concerns that they raised. Thank you.
Okay, very quickly, just on the climate change and the heat and those impacts. The biggest thing we can do is to shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy as a global community. And that will minimize impacts to everybody, biodiversity, people, everybody, the whole life system, right? So we have to, I think about how we can roll it out as fast as possible, but without sacrificing what we don't have to sacrifice, because there are also very important things. Of course, people are important, communities are important, but also biodiversity, which underpins everything in the world, is also important. So we have to do it as fast as possible to not, to reach our targets of not cooking ourselves to death, basically. The other question was on the NGO, yeah?
Would anybody like to take this, or we can take it on notice?
I think just I don't think it's appropriate for us to comment on this. It's probably more important that we look at the specific issue, and then we'll have the appropriate people within ADB to respond. I don't think it's appropriate for us to comment.
And my apologies for that one. Honestly, I go ADB.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Yep, and then maybe over there after that.
I like Asad's point when he said generation, which is solar, wind, has reached, in terms of capital cost, has reached grid parity, but the challenge remains on transmission, and specifically long distance HVDC. So my question is for Giacomo. Do you see any benefits in reduction on the hard costs for DC cables? And given that the backlog is huge, when do you expect those supply chain issues to get sorted? Or do we need to wait for China to ramp up capacity there so the cost can come down?
Thank you, Ganesh, for the question. The industry is moving already towards lower cost for transmission. What we call affordability is the big mantra at global level, no? To any TSO, any developer. So the fact that we are moving towards innovative designs, higher voltages, larger conductors, so some ways to move more electrons through a single circuit, this is all going in the direction of making the kilowatt per hour cheaper in terms of dollar or euro. So the industry is moving towards this kind of development, not just for the glorification of our engineers and our R&D guys, but it's all to pursue more sustainable and affordable projects. As said, the capacity, I would call it the reasonable, the logical capacity is there. Because if we want to think of deploying the APG projects all together by 2030, I can tell you, the industry has no capacity. We have no capacity for sure. We have been stepping out from some of the projects, interconnection projects to Singapore because we were confirmed and told that no way, you have to give us a completion in this date by end of 2027. And we said, sorry guys, we cannot help with that. And we are now seeing this very same project saying we are aiming at a completion by 2029, by 2030 and whatsoever. So we are now sitting on an uncomfortable chair saying, why are you out of this project? Since the capacity, now we have the capacity to serve this project. So if we look at, when we say the strategic planning is a planning that takes into account a realistic time when projects will get available permits, a realistic time for financial closing, and then on that basis, you plan the production and installation of cables. From that point of view, we are there. There have been no projects so far delayed or even cancelled at global level because of lack of capacity of cables or of installation vessels. So as a matter of fact, I would say that, again, the capacity is there. It is a realistic capacity that matches the real timing and the reasonable timing of the project's progress.
Can I just say, Ganesh, that a shortcut to the answer to your question is you track their stock price and that of Nexans, the French. And as long as the stock price is going up, that means the Chinese haven't yet ramped up. And that's your indicator.
They will be there from the cable point of view. Of course, they've been increasingly, the speed of their catch-up to the HVDC technology has been, of course, much faster than what we did. We started in the 1960s developing the HVDC technology. As a pioneer, you know that your growing curve is slower, no? But once the path is clear, all the rest of the industry can catch up. And this is the beauty of plurality, no? in the market. The point is that the cable is one of the things from the technical point of view and from the project implementation point of view is one of the easiest things that you have to consider. It's not your major headache when it comes to a project implementation.
No, thank you. We have run out of time. We're doing okay on time, but we probably have time for one more question and then we'll, I think, break. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question, I'm Paulo Pagadon from the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development. My question is for Beatrice. I find it interesting that you mentioned about the cost and delays because of the safeguards, it's because of the timing. You come at the end. Why is it that it's as if safeguards is being treated as an afterthought when logically it should be included in the beginning so as to minimize the retrofitting costs down the line? So, and how is the status of that appeal to get you started in the beginning and not just involved at the end?
Thank you. So I guess traditionally in private sector projects in ADB, we come in at a later stage. But we do now find that a lot of the companies we work with have started, they've considered environmental and social safeguards when they're doing their planning. Some of our friends from Monsoon were in the project area for 10 years before we started working together. So they did a lot of community engagement already before we came in. there's a little bit of a gap sometimes with what is normally done and what lenders such as ourselves require. And that's because I guess we have decades of experience and we know what we have to watch out for. And that's across all the other IFIs. Where we look at upstream engagement, sometimes, for example, governments will say, these are the concession areas for wind or solar, and then you bid on it, right? So even our partners don't have a say on what location they're going to bid on. So when we're talking about upstream engagement, it's upstream, like with the governments, helping them come up with strategic land use plans, for example, or coming up with policies that enable this, the downstream projects to come through with high quality and with good benefits for everyone. So that's I think it happens, but it's not happening fast enough, and that's what we're working on right now to figure out.
Excellent. Thanks, Beatrice. So that brings us to the end of the day's discussions. I'm sure the panel will be around for a few minutes afterwards if you have any follow-on questions, but can I invite everyone to for a round of applause to thank the panelists.
So big thanks to all the panelists for the very candid and powerful discussions. We clearly saw progress, opportunities, and most importantly, what needs to be addressed. We would also like to acknowledge the financial support from the government of UK through its ASEAN Catalytic Finance Facility for this panel and much other work to advance the APG. So for now, we would like to take a break and we reconvene at 11 a.m., which is 15 minutes from now.